What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Eclectic Beard. So this go around, we'll be looking at Formula One explained for rookies. Now, I haven't watched a whole lot of Formula One. I'm just being honest with you. I've looked at a couple clips here and there, and I did watch, I want to say that 75% of one of the last races last year, or of this past season. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but it was a couple weeks ago. It was like a month and a half ago. So... and I was just like, man, the number one, the tracks look a lot cooler than what just the circle tracks that you have on NASCAR. Because there's turns that aren't, you're not turning left the whole time. Or at least not the same type of left the whole time. So, it's one of those things I want to take a further dive into. And yeah, here we go. Formula One, explained for rookies.
Happen over the course of the next 66 laps. Max Verstappen is champion of the world!
You've been hearing about F1 too, right? Cool, let's talk about it.
Formula One racing into Miami for the first time.
The hottest ticket in town.
Hooked on Drive to Survive.
Drive to Survive.
Drive to Survive.
This is a car race at over 200 miles an hour in cities all over the world.
Miami.
All those track configurations too.
This is a car race at over 200 miles an hour in cities.
There we go. Yeah, these track configurations, man. Look at just the amount of curves and the hairpins and stuff. Oh my God. See, you get long straightaways and then having to take in actually, that looks like that would be absolutely insane. I've got to take and watch more, of this in the coming year.
All over the world.
Miami Grand Prix, Bahrain Grand Prix, here in Monaco.
With insanely famous drivers.
Abu Dhabi, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
Racing cars so advanced that they're practically spaceships. And so expensive that they had to make a rule that teams couldn't spend more than $140 million.
What?
Each. And it's only getting bigger. Just look at this. This is from a construction camera at one of two new US racetracks. This one's in Miami. This cost $40 million to build, and it hosted nearly 250,000 people over 3 days. That's a Super Bowl worth of people every day. And one of them was me.
It's the first ever Miami Grand Prix. We're racing in the States and it's lights out and away we go.
This is the coolest thing ever. I just love it.
Side note, I didn't know until recently that Topps, one of the biggest sports card manufacturers, actually made F1 trading cards. So yeah, I was actually like, should I buy a box and see who I can pull and look these cats up.
F1. But a lot of people, because of all this hype, they're hearing about it right now for the first time, and they're feeling a little bit,
I don't understand.
So let's get into it. This is F1 explained for rookies. What you need to know to keep up with this crazy, expensive sport that everyone's suddenly obsessed with.
Lewis Hamilton!
Verstappen holds it!
It's done!
But it's also a look at the bigger question here, the huge question, which is, why do this? Like, why pour so much money, so much technological effort into F1, into entertainment? The answer is in what we get in return. This isn't just a car race. This is a space program for the road.
General growth in interest.
Formula One.
F1's becoming much more of a thing here in the States.
The Monaco Grand Prix, win the Italian Grand Prix, the Bahrain Grand Prix.
If you're new to F1,
Bro, NASCAR is one of the most boring things. And they've added some road tracks, and it's boring to watch. Once they added restrictor plates in NASCAR, it was all over with. It sucked. It sucked since they added restrictor plates. Granted, it's never been the most exciting. However, adding the restrictor plates and you don't have cars that being tuned even to what NASCAR allows. You could have a car that was faster than the rest of the field due to the way it was tuned, and it would be just so apparent. But these restrictor plates have all of them just so, they're group racing basically, and it's awful because you don't get to see anybody start from maybe didn't qualify that great and just catch up. Well, you still see that, but that's not due to speed. That's more due to wrecks and positioning and drafting and things of that nature. It's just and a left turn, woohoo, another left turn. It sucks.
You might know its American cousins. NASCAR has the least family resemblance. Closed cockpits, oval tracks.
My uncle used to watch
IndyCar
IndyCar.
and F1 look more related. They've got the spaghetti-looking track, open cockpits. But there's one really important difference between these two. And it's the reason why F1 specifically is such a big deal. In IndyCar, all of the cars use the same frame, or chassis, the DW12. So the competition here is mostly in how you race that car. But in F1, every team has to design and manufacture their own cars. And the best part is that they get to improve the cars between each race, or not, depending on how they do. So the competition in F1 actually centers around the car itself, not just how you race it, but also how you build it and rebuild it again and again and again.
So the differences in aerodynamics, suspension, and everything else can be changed race to race depending on how you're... Okay, so that's interesting because now you're taking out... You still got to rely on the driver's skill, but being able to improve on and make changes to different things. What else?
This is why I love F1. It looks like the sport of daredevils, but much more than that. It's the sport of nerds. But before we get to that, I want to show you something. One of the questions that I get asked most about my videos is, where did you get all of that footage? And the answer is story blocks. Seriously, I use them all the time, and the team races 2 cars, so 2 drivers for the same team. Each event, or Grand Prix, is 3 days: practice, qualifying, and race day. I watch these on TV every time they're on, but this was the first time I ever got to see it in person.
Got to see the car up close, that was awesome. Now I am inside the Mercedes garage.
Truly, I have never had more fun at a sporting event and seen less of what was actually going on.
So right now they're about to do a practice pit.
Here's how this works. The order of who does the fastest lap on qualifying day becomes the lineup at the starting line on race day. And
That makes
isn't easy,
sense.
so where you
That's how
start
a lot
is
of other
really
races
the
do it.
Depending on where drivers finish, they get different numbers of points. After 10th place, no points for you. Drivers want to get the most points themselves to win.
Oh, wow. So if you get outside of 10th, you get no points. Bro, that can make for some nerve-wracking... Because you got to think, if you get a couple of races where you finish outside the top 10, well, your standing is in the points. Like, unless you take and have a really good run of stuff, you're kind of SOL. And it's not hard for, with everything these days being a what have you done for me lately, that's one of those things that why would a team keep you on? Oh, wow.
Something called the Drivers' Championship. But teams want to get the most points total to win the Constructors' Championship. The 2 championship thing actually kind of makes for funny mismatched incentives sometimes. You can hear it on the radio when teams have one strategy, like they want to let drivers pass each other, and drivers get really mad about that.
If he's quicker, we let 3. That's very unfair, but okay.
But generally, everybody agrees about the big things, which are drivers, race your fastest. Teams, make the best car. All right, here's the fun part.
Lego is here. Hey, kids, look.
There's my driver. Hello.
Now, I will say this in reference to the whole Constructor Championship and them taking in for, having their drivers pass each other. Because that's one of the things they were talking about, and it was the Abu Dhabi one that I watched. I'm trying to remember exactly how many laps I watched. I know I watched Hamilton go from like 6th place up to 5th and back down to like 8th. Like, he wasn't doing so hot with that race. And he's really the only big name I recognize, but it's only because his freaking face is plastered over everything that's racing related, at least here in the States for the most part. That isn't NASCAR. Anyways, I digress. But that's one of the things they were talking about was the Constructor Championship and how the 2 Mercedes drivers there, him and his teammate, they still had a chance at possibly, you know, finishing well or at the top of the Constructor Championship. So
Lewis Hamilton? Think of an F1 car like an airplane upside down. Both meant to move as quickly through the air as possible, right? But where an airplane's wings work to lift it up, these cars' wings work to keep it down. Why?
Yeah, the
because winning
downforce
doesn't just depend on going fast. It also depends on keeping control. And that requires a firm grip on the ground. Take a look at the shape of this car. Now watch how
you're going to get downforce right here. You're going to take and get some here. You're going to take them, but the aerodynamics of it as a whole allowing the. I love how it's pointed up, but yet, oh my God, this thing is just looking at it. Because this is I've never watched a video or seen anything where they just show the car and it's that kind of close up and you can see some detail. Now, granted, this just the way this right here is done, because that's not going to allow, you got air not only going under here, it's like you've got an air channel almost right here. Is that little fence? So I mean, the amount of downforce that's generated on this, along with the tires itself, whether they're warm or cold, and you know, and the wear throughout the race, in between whenever you got to take and do it. Like if you've got it properly tuned, like, bro, you're gonna go fast as all get out, and you've got this and all of this right. I've never seen one with, because it looks like there's so many different channels for air, and again, you got to have the aerodynamics, but you got to have things set up right so these go fast enough that any lift up front, and you've seen where they'll take and actually flip, and you know they'll get liftoff basically. They'll go airborne. So it's, oh dude, apologies.
the air moves across it. See how some goes above the wing and some squeezes the long way underneath it? That creates a situation where there's higher pressure above and lower pressure below, sucking the car toward the ground. That's actually happening all over the car, not just on the wings. And we could talk for hours about the design features on this thing, how they shape and use the air. Some pull air in through the car to cool it down. You can actually see there's a hole there. I think they're trying to imply that on my Lego model.
That's pretty cool.
Some actually let the driver release air, lessening that downward pressure and allowing them to go faster in order to pass. It's kind of like a Mario boost.
So that'd be good on straightaways.
Listen for DRS here.
Now, Charles Leclerc is going to have DRS to try and fight it back.
Taken together, an F1 car is just
that's brilliant. That's brilliant design, because you're going to want that downforce as you're going around some of these hairpins and other curves. I mean, you're going to have to take a break going into them regardless, but the added downforce for the added stability and stuff like that. But having the straightaways, the ability to open that for speed, bro, whoever thought about that as a design feature, that's brilliant.
Symphony of aerodynamics. I actually got to see them up close and personal when I was in Miami.
We're going there.
I absolutely did not keep my cool.
I'm trying to be cool, but it's a real scene there.
You can see teams perfecting these cars over the years, understanding the need for wings and adding them and changing the shape and pushing our understanding of aerodynamics to shave off just fractions of a second. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of people work on this, all for one team. So, how much does this cost? F1 teams don't really want to share the details here, so there's a lot of speculation. But they're also companies, and some of them have to file their financials somewhere. So with a little bit of research into various European countries' reporting requirements, hold on. Dun, 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 dun.
Jesus.
Here they are. Annual reports for every F1 team worldwide, which is actually 8 out of 10, so I'm feeling pretty good about it.
It's pretty good.
As a fan, this is kind of cool. Like, look, this is Toto Wolff's signature. What I learned from all this is that running an F1 team costs anywhere from $95 million.
It's funny, that cat right there, the Toto Wolff or whatever, Sky Sports is who was taken, and actually, yeah, that's where I watched the race. That's at least that's who was taken and broadcasting it, and I think it was the NBC Sports or something like that here. So, anyways, he the interviewer was pushy, but like he was like trying to talk to everybody, and he come up that fella, and he seemed nice enough. He seemed nice enough, but I noticed the face. Like
to $425 million.
Ooh, that's a lot of money.
yeah.
But the year after these were filed, F1 instituted a new rule saying all teams were only allowed to spend $140 million. So these reports are going to look a lot different for this next coming year.
Oh, good.
Still a lot. No matter what,
But $140 million to be able to put towards. Now, does that include like the pit crew? Because I'm sure them cars have to be. Them cars, you got to. If you go through 2 or 3 cars, like you could rack up some cost there.
F1 teams spend a ton of money. So, what do they make? These reports show that F1 teams make approximately nothing. They run surprisingly close to break even. Red Bull, for example, made $230 million in revenue, and then add these two up, $229 million in costs. And they ended up with approximately $1.2 million in profit. This is in pounds, actually, so that's $1.5 million.
So here's my question, because that makes total sense, okay, as far as the profits and stuff like that. But you got to think on the flip side, the advertisement that comes with the cars, because you're going to have the actual company that owns the team going to have that advertisement on the car. I wonder if any type of like deals with any other, like any manufacturers or any like anything like that comes into play as far as that. And if it does, that's cool, but you still got the advertisement for it, the people that are going to take and buy product because of it. So the correlation, I think, is probably a little bit more than just that 1.2 million to what they're getting as far as profit is concerned.
These aren't the wildly profitable enterprises I was imagining. So why do they do it? Well, take a look at this. This is the Ferrari annual report. Our brand image depends in part on the success of our Formula One racing team. The racing team is a key component of our marketing strategy. It's advertising.
Advertising. It's great.
They use F1 to sell other stuff, whether that's luxury sports cars or a sports drink.
Red Bull gives you wings.
I mean, as entertainment.
And you got to think with not so much like Ferrari or Mercedes, because they're already established, well-known brands. Red Bull is too, but they're automotive. Like everybody's going to associate them with automotive. So you're going to take and have the accessory type stuff, the people that are going to be long-term buyers and things of that nature. But it's Red Bull, like the amount of advertising that probably is done via not only the Formula One teams, but their extreme sports, like the planes that do the plane racing or whatever. Like that's wild to see. But they've got so many different teams. But the advertisement for these, that this stuff does for these companies, that they can incorporate into, whether it be commercials or just the fact that people watch it, they get a brand loyalty to that. They buy the merch. They take and buy anything associated with that brand, and part of that gets psychologically associated with the F1 team. Pretty interesting.
F1 is incredible. But a lot of people do feel that it's somewhat wasteful.
How much does a Formula One car cost?
$400 million.
Is it worth all that money?
This is bigger than F1. It's kind of crazy to think about how much work we as a species.
Is it worth all that money? Well, that's
ourselves.
subjective, butthead.
But I think what makes F1 feel particularly acute for some people is the technology element here. All of this engineering work and all of this energy being spent on 20
gets put into vehicles later.
reliant cars makes people wonder sometimes if that energy might be better spent elsewhere.
And I understand the whole petrol aspect, the racing fuel element, the fossil fuel element. But anybody that's wanting to push towards something like EVs, as nice as EVs are, you also have to take into consideration the environmental damage that the mining for the lithium and the amount of smoke and stuff done to for all of the components, like the amount of environmental damage during the composition of, the building of the batteries and things of that nature. It's between the lithium sands, the cobalt, and the other. It's until you can get that down. I mean, it's kind of hypocritical because it's not a net zero product. It's not a net zero carbon product. Just isn't.
Literally anywhere else.
But F1 is more than just entertainment. It's better thought of actually as one giant experiment. F1 pushes everything to the extreme. What do you need to create to compete at this level, to keep control at these speeds, to keep the driver safe in these conditions? The idea is that the technology that they build ends up trickling down to all of us non-race car drivers. My question was, is this actually true, or does it just sound good?
No, it's true.
I wanted to find specific car parts.
And it's not so much, and it's just not just the car parts though. That's the thing. It's not just car parts. Some of the safety features, like their suits, it's used. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's done in Formula One and other racing that's used in other aspects.
Developed for
industries.
F1 and then ended up in my car. But the more research I did, the more complicated it got. People often talk about paddle shifters, for example, but those were actually developed decades before F1. F1 teams just made them better. Same for active suspension, anti-lock brakes, traction control. What I found was that F1 was less trickle-down and more flywheel. F1 combines technologies that might already exist and then pushes them to an extreme, making them better in the process and then inspiring, or literally manufacturing, better tech for all of us. For example, take thermal efficiency, the percentage of energy from combustion that actually makes the car go, as opposed to being lost to heat. Most combustion road cars have a thermal efficiency between 20 and 30%, which means only a third of the energy actually makes the car go. F1 cars can't refuel during a race, so there's a very strong incentive for them to be efficient. They're at about 50% now, thanks to new hybrid engines, gains that have been dragging the rest of the car industry forward. Or data collection. Sensors on F1 cars collect huge amounts of information and then feed it back to the driver and the team. They didn't invent a lot of these systems, but they use them in ways that they've never been used before. And that's actually getting more and more important as we move potentially towards self-driving cars. This is the real promise of F1, and it all stems from that original requirement to build their own cars. Basically, we'll do all of this research and development, and we'll create new technologies and also combine all of the cutting-edge tech, and we'll push it to its limits and develop it.
Almost makes you wonder if that $140 million limitation, though, might take and have some effect on some of that stuff going forward.
Further, and you don't even need to pay for it. We'll race these things against other groups of engineers doing exactly the same thing in this crazy round-the-world sport that lots of people really love, that is actually, at the end of the day, the biggest, most expensive group project science competition of all time. People debate whether or not we should spend money on lots of our efforts to learn. And yet, they consistently push forward both the tech that we actually use and our understanding of the world around us. In this case, it also makes some money, and it's fun to watch. I think once you see the promise of F1, it allows you to think differently about lots of things. We need people working far beyond the edge, like pulling forward the limits of what we can do. The question now is, what do we need to learn next?
If it's like any of the rest of the sports, they're looking at electrification.
If F1 pushes forward car innovation and the future of cars is electric, does F1 need to get more electric too? And if F1 doesn't go more electric, does it get farther and farther from its original promise over time? Less applicable to the technology that we use and more a novelty. Oh, let's go watch those cars that use gas. I don't know. Now you're up to speed. You can watch a race, you can enjoy it with your friends, and you can also speculate, like the rest of us, where it's all gonna go. I'll be watching with you, and I'll be rooting for my favorite team.
All right, so there we have it. Formula One explained for rookies. I got to say, that was interesting. Definitely be taking a look at some more Formula One stuff going forward. We'll learn more about the sport. I've always liked racing. Like, NASCAR, I followed NASCAR up until the point, probably about 2 or 3 years after Senior died. Dale Earnhardt Senior died. And then it just started to just be not so fun to watch anymore because it just wasn't. The restrictor plate races and a lot of the changes they've made is just it's not like it was the most exciting sport ever beforehand, but I've always enjoyed taking and going down like the drag strip, watch two cats just line them up and let's go. Let's see what we can do in the eighth or a quarter mile. Love that. Absolutely love that. I watched, and it's the only race I've ever, as far as Formula One is concerned, I've ever watched with any kind of interest was watching. It was the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, I believe it was. Like I said, about a month and a half ago. Might not have been that long. I'm trying to remember exactly how far back it was. But I was struck. I was like, man, these cats in these straightaways, they are absolutely screaming. And then just the turns that they had to, they've got on the tracks and the different track configurations they have. Yeah. I definitely want to look more at this because I've always enjoyed racing. I think competition in sports in general. Might actually wind up taking and buying some Formula One cards and number one, seeing if there's any value to them, but also taking, learn some more about the drivers that way as well. But yeah, hopefully y'all enjoyed this. I know I did. I'm going to be looking at more F1 stuff. Y'all be good to each other. Love yourselves. Peace.